Welcome to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. I'm Dave Richard with Sportsline expert Katie Mox, two-time fantasy analyst of the year, Jamey Eisenberg. You're raising your eyebrows like you didn't know that.
No, I just wondering why the writing is so big on the paper.
So I don't forget to say it. Plus, I'm an old guy, so
we were talking about how you're aging backwards, though.
I'm not aging. Trust me, I'm not aging back. I wish, but I'm not.
Looks-wise, but we need bigger font.
Yeah, and I was called. My nickname was Belly today on the podcast, so I'm going in the exact opposite direction. For once, Jamey was nice. I'm not saying his name, but it might rhyme with Radam Razor. Welcome to the show. Every Friday, 1 o'clock, right here on CBS Sports Network. We're going to get you ready for the week of fantasy football action ahead. Start, sit, sleepers, the whole 9 yards. We're going to go through all of our rankings, but first, and this is going to happen every Friday, we're going to go through the Thursday game that just happened. And it's a pretty good game, I'd say. Not so bad. All right, I'm underselling it. It was awesome, but for fantasy managers, there's some panic going around because Travis Kelce, dud. Mark Andrews, dud. Isaiah Likely had the best fantasy game of anybody in the game. So let's talk about this. It's the Ravens and the Chiefs. The Chiefs won 27-20. Travis Kelce underwhelmed. So did Mark Andrews. What's the panic meter for these guys, Jamey, coming off of this game?
Nothing yet. You know, look, we were concerned about Kelce based on where he was getting drafted, and the thought was, are they going to manage his snap count? Are they going to have other options in the passing game because of the additions of Xavier Worthy and eventually Marquise Brown? And Patrick Mahomes just, needing to open things up in the offense, and we saw it. So Rashee Rice didn't get suspended. Looks great.
He really does.
Xavier Worthy with a couple splash plays. He's going to get worked in more and more. And eventually Marquise Brown's going to be a big part of this offense. So Kelce's going to be fine. There's going to be plenty of good games. He had a bunch of duds last year as well.
Yeah.
But if you were drafting him 22nd overall is kind of where his average draft position was, you were kind of expecting old Travis Kelce. And you got old Travis Kelce, unfortunately, the wrong side of things at 35 years old.
I had him for an anytime touchdown. I thought with Taylor being at the game for sure. And but I'm looking at these stats here. 4 straight game under 50 receiving yards. It's the longest in his career. And also
in the regular season.
In the regular season, yes. But do you think, Jamey, because I feel like last year they kind of were conservative with him in the beginning part of the season just to have him good for the playoffs. Is that maybe why you're not so concerned?
That was one of my biggest concerns. Again, lowest snap count since his rookie season. And they said that in the Super Bowl. Like, where did this come from? Why were you so amazing in the playoffs? And they said, we wanted to make sure at 34, he was good to go. They're shooting for a three-peat. Winning in the regular season is important. Clearly, they have to get there. But him putting up 8 for 100 is not what they need to do to wear him down. And they have other options. And these younger receivers are going to be big play threats. And again, we're missing a big piece. It's only going to be a little bit, I think, more of a damper on Travis Kelce, but there's going to be plenty of big games. When he scores touchdowns, and they'll come in bunches, I think he's going to score more than 5. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah, right.
He'll be fine.
So the thing that worries me is he played a lot of snaps in the game. So I don't know if they're really worried about holding him back.
It's the opener. Plus they also have 10 days to rest after this one.
If I had to be a little bit more worried about the two, it would be Kelce that I'm slightly worried on, but I'm not dropping him off my team. I'm not going to trade him for peanuts, and I'm definitely not doing that with Mark Andrews either. We both saw the game. You saw the game. He was double teamed like crazy.
Yeah.
A lot of those touchdowns and almost touchdowns that Lamar Jackson threw, he was double covered. There's going to be games moving forward where he's not going to be double covered. Now's the time to buy low on Mark Andrews if the guy that has Andrews in your fantasy team is freaking out. Go give him somebody off your bench. Get Mark Andrews, especially if you're streaming tight ends. He will still finish as a top 6 fantasy tight end.
The only problem with that, though, is you got to make sure they have a tight end because they're not just trading Andrews.
I don't care what they need. That's for them.
They're not replacing him with Tyler Conklin. They want to make sure they have a tight end to replace him with. So you might have to trade him your tight end.
But week 1 is notorious for fantasy managers panicking, and they're freaking out about Andrews. This is a way you could take advantage. But if you have Andrews, don't panic. He's going to be just fine. And nobody's panicking about the quarterbacks either. Lamar Jackson had a monster game. I don't even know if there's anything to really say about Lamar Jackson. Are you worried about him? I know his completion rate on throws, 10 plus air yards, was a little bit jarring. But I still think the rushing production, which is clearly part of the reason why you drafted Lamar Jackson, is going to be in play for as long as he's healthy. He put the team on his back, nearly tied/won the game at the end. I think fantasy managers know what to do with Lamar Jackson, and that's start him. I don't know if there's really anything else that we need to say, so why don't we talk about Patrick Mahomes, because he did not come through for fantasy managers. Everybody's freaking out about the tight ends, but Jamey, no one's freaking out about Patrick Mahomes. Should they be?
No. Again, you look at what he's capable of doing, and if it's funny, he flips the ball behind to Xavier Worthy. If it's one of his little patented flips the ball in front, that's a 2-touchdown game for him. Kelsey's going to be better. They're going to get Marquise Brown on the field. You saw what Rice is in this offense now, which is just an accelerated version of what he was a year ago. And so, no, you shouldn't be panicking. Now, if we have another sub-20-plus point game moving forward, the people who were drafting him as the first quarterback, which there's plenty of people who are, understandably so. Look,
but I had Xavier Worthy as well, so it ended up being not so bad.
You can't fault the theory behind it, because better better weapons to open up the passing game. Like kept talking about, being more aggressive downfield. This is one of the best defenses that they're going to face in Baltimore.
Yeah.
Similarly for the Ravens, one of the best defenses they're going to face in Kansas City, and they just played each other. The last game for the Chiefs, the last game for Baltimore. So there's so much familiarity here, so I wouldn't be concerned just yet.
We talked about the running backs on our Fantasy Football Today podcast. You can download it off of any podcast platform. You can watch them on YouTube. So we're going to skip over the running backs for now. Xavier Worthy, we've talked about a lot. Rashee Rice is the other guy who really stepped up and had a monster game for fantasy managers. Do either one of you think that this is as good as it gets for him and that they should sell high on Rashee Rice? Or is this just the beginning of a huge breakout year for him?
I would say it's the beginning of a huge breakout year for him, but yeah, you.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Again, this is what we were talking about when, if he does not get suspended and he doesn't have to miss any time, he was the go-to guy for Mahomes before Kelsey took off in the playoffs. And there's always been this receiving threat, whether it was Tyreek Hill, a little bit of Juju Smith-Schuster, and now it's, Rashee Rice taking the mantle and running with it. And so 9 targets, 7 catches, 103 yards. The design plays were fantastic. The first target options for Mahomes last night, I think it was 77% were to Rashee Rice. So that just shows you he's looking for him. The play designs were fantastic. We talked about this earlier, Dave, on our podcast. Getting him matched up with linebackers is great. So yes, he could be a top 10 receiver. That's just how much upside he has.
Absolutely could be. And Isaiah Likely is going to be a very hot waiver wire claim. I think he's going to continue to be a focal point of Baltimore's offense. I would absolutely spend a top waiver claim. Not ready to say that he's the number one guy. Let's see the rest of week 1 first before we make him the top guy. But Isaiah Likely absolutely will be. Think of him more as like the number 2 wide receiver in the Ravens offense. And if you do that, I think you'll be happy with him. I don't know if he's ever going to have 12 targets in a game again. Triple digits in yardage. Don't know if that's going to happen again, but I'm sure we will see more touchdowns for Isaiah Likely. He's available in about half of CBS Sports leagues. Speaking of more games, there's a game Friday night. It's happening in Brazil. It's between the Packers and the Eagles. Let's talk about this one for fantasy managers, and let's just start with Philadelphia. Jalen Hurts, must-start type of fantasy quarterback. Any concern that it's on the road or it's against Green Bay and their defense is at full strength, that maybe he won't have the best game that you would expect from Jalen Hurts?
Yeah, I'm not high on the Eagles at all, though, this season. I know everybody else is, and I know that on paper it seems like they're going to be a very good team. But I worry about the new coordinators, and he has all these shiny weapons. And by the way, they're in Brazil. No one's ever played on this ground before. We don't know what the field condition is going to be like. We don't know what the fans and the environment is going to be like. So I'm pretty high on Green Bay. I actually took Green Bay money line on this one, so I do worry a little bit about Jalen Hurts.
It makes sense. I think this is going to be an interesting game because it's a new coordinator. Kellen Moore, like you said. How much will the changes that Green Bay made, some tweaks on defense, Xavier McKinney, for example, going in the back end of the defense, how much will that impact things? But the way fantasy managers drafted these guys, they did not draft them to be on their bench. Jalen Hurts, one of the top 3 quarterbacks. He's clearly going to be in a lot of lineups. And then, the receiving options here for the Eagles, A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith could be 2 of the best in the league. 2 years ago, we were drafting them both as top 12 options. Devontae Smith's value has fallen a little bit, but still so much upside in Kellen Moore's offense, basically moving into the slot was what we hope, and we can see him open things up. You see Sportsline has both these guys as top 17 fantasy options.
And in our consensus rankings, they're both top 20 wide receivers. You will see their names again a little bit later on in the show. A quick word on Saquon Barkley. You drafted him to be a must-start. I don't think there's any reason to even think about taking him out of lineups. In a DFS tournament for the game, I think he makes sense being in the captain spot. I think he gets a lot of work, and I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up with this game 4 or 5 catches. I think that's just going to be a new staple, new wrinkle, if you will, in Philadelphia's offense. I'm bullish on Saquon.
Do you see his receiving prop on FanDuel? It's 16.5 yards. It's like a no-brainer.
That's a slam dunk.
First of all, anytime touchdown, probably the odds on that are about first touchdown. I can see we saw it with, Derrick Henry last night, and I don't think we're going to see as many tush pushes is this year with Kelsey out. So I like Saquon for the first touchdown of the game, too.
I like that, too.
I like that a lot. Let's move to Green Bay. Jordan Love was also drafted to be a fantasy starter, and we're not going to like him as much as Jalen Hurts, but he's still a top 10 fantasy quarterback. Philadelphia secondary, without Isaiah Rodgers, they're going to have a couple of rookies starting in there, Quinyon Mitchell, chief among them. I think it's a pretty good opportunity for Green Bay, kind of playing off of what you said, Katie, that you like Green Bay on the money line. I think they will keep it close, and I do see Jordan Love as a top 10 fantasy quarterback. He averaged 25 fantasy points per game in his last 9 regular season games, and we all remember how awesome he was in the playoffs. I want to skip ahead to the wide receivers for the Green Bay Packers. There's Christian Watson, there's Jaden Reed, there's Dontavian Wicks, there's Romeo Doubs. Jamey, do you have a favorite among them? How many of them can you actually start?
I don't think you can necessarily say any of them are must-start receivers in 2 receiver leagues. In 3 receiver leagues, you can make a case for Watson and Reed just based on A, where they were drafted, and B, what their expected roles should be. Watson has always been my favorite Packers receiver. If any of them is going to break out this year, it's Christian Watson if he stays healthy. We've seen the upside, whether it was Aaron Rodgers in his rookie year, last year with Jordan Love, the 2 games that they played together before Watson's last IR stint, over 20 PPR points in both those games. So for this week, number 3 wide receiver with the chance to eventually become a top 20-ish fantasy wide receiver. There's just that much upside, but better DFS play, for showdown lineups. 3 receiver leagues with a flex, you could start him there. But in the 2 receiver, 1 flex league, I don't think he's going to be in a lot of lineups, which is why you see a start percentage.
Right, sure. And he is their big play receiver, but I don't think he's their most versatile receiver. I think that's Jaden Reed. And I do like Watson more than Reed. But it wouldn't surprise me if Reed had a 5-catch game with a couple of carries mixed in. Kind of the safer of the 2 between him and Watson. Watson will be a little bit more volatile from week to week, but I do like the matchup, especially for Watson, because of that secondary. Alrighty, last but not least, Josh Jacobs. Top 12 running back this week. How do we feel about Jacobs? I think it's pretty obvious.
There's nobody
else. Even against Philadelphia, you said it. Literally nobody else there. Jamey, you've got him at 9th. I've got him at 8th. Heath Cummings has him at 4th. Clearly a top 10 fantasy running back. I don't think there's really anything else that we need to say other than start Josh Jacobs. Let's go to a tweet to answer the fans' questions. We're going to do this every segment. And here's one from Doug C. Cup of Cheese 152, of course.
What a name.
Love in Brazil versus the Eagles or Trevor Lawrence against Miami? Jamey, I'll give this one to you.
I love Trevor Lawrence, but I'm going to stick with Jordan Love. I think there's just there's so much upside for both these guys, so it sounds as if Cup of Cheese is probably a Packers fan. I'd probably lean toward the team that you root for.
Anytime I get a pretzel, there's a cup of cheese that comes along with it. The big soft pretzels. You got to dip it in there.
What are the Bavarian pretzels?
Whatever they're called. You can call it a vegetable,
ones.
Whatever you want. I'm eating it with the cup of cheese. When we come back, rankings run through. We'll start with the quarterbacks, including Jamey Eisenberg's start of the week. You're not going to want to miss this on Fantasy Football Today.
Golf.
We are back on Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. And it's time to go through our quarterback rankings. We're going to show you our consensus rankings at the QB positions and kind of just do a run through the players that we like, the players we don't like. And then when we're done with that, we'll go with the running backs. Let's get started with the quarterback that Jamey likes. I can't say you like him better than everybody else because then you'd have him at number 1 in your rankings. But you are a huge fan of Jared Goff.
Yeah, I love the setup for him. It's two things that are at play that I always look for. One, home away. He's been great at home since 2021. He's played 21 home games in Detroit, and 16 of them he's been 20 or more fantasy points. 10 of them he's been 25 or more fantasy points. Great matchup against the Rams defense that's going through some changes. New defensive coordinator, no Aaron Donald, no Ernest Jones, so a couple of big pieces missing over there. And then you got the revenge game narrative. He used to play for the Rams. Obviously, last time he played them in the regular season, not so great, a little bit better in the playoffs. Clearly, they got the win. But I think you're looking at Jared Goff having an opportunity to go off. Here's top 5 quarterback for me. So appreciate Sportsline backing it up.
I appreciate that Jameson Williams could be a benefactor for Jared Goff. Because remember last year, there was a little bit of dinking and dunking. I mean, Laporta would make some splash plays. St. Brown would make some splash plays. Now they've got somebody who can really make some splash plays. I don't know if I'm ready to start Jameson Williams on my fantasy teams. He's kind of in that same bucket as Xavier Worthy. But I think that this offense could really open up. I don't like him as much as you like him, but I do think he's a top 10 quarterback, which means, oh boy, you win your draft and you drafted Goff to be your backup quarterback. What do you do with him? And I'll ask you this, Mr. Start of the Week. versus Jaden Daniels. I'm sure you drafted Daniels before Goff.
I did. I'm in one league where I'm starting Goff over Anthony Richardson and drafted both those guys.
Wow.
So I think there's as much upside, if not more, for Goff this week. I know Richardson clearly is a wild card, but I just love the setup for Jared Goff that much.
So let's see where he shows up in our consensus rankings. If you were paying attention on the last graphic, you already know the answer to that question, the quarterback consensus rankings. You're going to see Lamar Jackson. You're going to see Patrick Mahomes on this list. They played on Thursday. Jalen Hurts you'll have to make a decision on. Spoiler, you're going to start Jalen Hurts. And I think you'll do the same with Jordan Love. Although there are some quarterbacks behind Jordan Love that are interesting. Tua Tagovailoa and Trevor Lawrence. Specifically Trevor Lawrence. I think he stands out to have a really good game. I don't know if that Dolphins pass rush is going to be at full strength. I don't know if the secondary is going to be good over the course of the season. I think the slot is going to be an open spot for him. And I think Trevor Lawrence, I've got him ranked 15th. I'm actually the lowest of the crew at CBS, but I think he's actually a good start this week. I'd rather start Love, but I think Trevor Lawrence is actually a very, very good play. What about Dak Prescott? I'm not even sure. If you show the list again, Sharon, maybe you can bring it back up. Was he even on the top 12 consensus list? I'm not sure. You see it right there. 12th for me. He's not going to be on that list. Heath has him 14th. Jamey, 15th on Dak Prescott. It's got to be the matchup more than anything else,
yeah,
right?
This defense, when you look at the Browns, is one of the best units in all of football. And then you got to think, too, Dak Prescott, he doesn't really have a lot of weapons, and his best weapon just signed about a week ago, so it's likely to think that they're going to take a little bit of time to heat up here.
What about 13 through 24? Take a look at those quarterbacks. These are the guys that are maybe starters. You see Jaden Daniels, there's Dak Prescott at 14th. I know that Jared Goff is our favorite in that game against the Rams, but I think the Rams quarterback could be in for a very big game too. We saw it last year when Nakua was healthy, when Cooper Kupp was healthy, when the offensive line, it wasn't great, but they were out there and they were doing their thing. Stafford finished the year with at least 22 fantasy points in 6 of his last 7 games. That includes his very last game against Detroit in the playoffs.
Yeah.
He had over 350 yards. He had multiple touchdowns. Would not surprise. Look at the lettuce on this guy. Look at his hair. Wow, good job, Matthew Stafford. I've got him as a top 12 quarterback this week. I'm a little bit more bullish on Matthew Stafford. Would start him over Trevor Lawrence. Would start him over Tua Tagovailoa. I think he's got upside for 3 touchdowns and over 350 yards. One last quarterback to talk about. And it's your quarterback, Katie. It's
Brock Purdy. Yeah.
Going up against the Jets.
Yeah.
This is a tough matchup with a left tackle who's barely been in camp, with a wide receiver, his number one wide receiver. We'll talk about Ayuk in the next segment. Where do you come out on Brock Purdy? Would you start him over Jared Goff, for example?
No, I would do Jared. First of all, that's one of the highest totals that we've seen on the slate. It's going to be a shootout. It's in a dome. Both quarterbacks in that matchup are very comfortable playing in that building as well. You look at someone like Brock Purdy, struggled a little bit in the preseason. I'm not worried about it long term, but like you said, this matchup, the Jets allowed the 3rd fewest passing yards, tied for the 4th fewest passing touchdowns all last season. You got Ayuk, which I don't think will depend on Ayuk so much out the gate. It's not like what we just talked about with Dak and CeeDee Lamb, because while he's one of the best at his position, he's not even the best on the team. But I worry about the people that kind of came in late, even Trent Williams, and them getting up to speed, especially against this defense. So I would not start Brock Purdy.
We are all out on Brock Purdy. Make a note of that if you've got him on your fantasy
squad. I love him,
squad.
though, and I want them to win.
He's going to be fine later on. We're not dropping Brock Purdy. But he's some of their. Here's an interesting question. We saw Russell Wilson. It looked like he didn't practice on Friday. If Justin Fields is the starter for the Steelers, Jamey, would you start him over Brock Purdy?
I would start Justin Fields over a lot of quarterbacks.
Would you start him over Stafford, Tua, Trevor Lawrence?
I wouldn't start him over Tua or Lawrence. The thing about Stafford that makes me just a little bit nervous, you mentioned the offensive line. I mean, both tackles might not be there. You know, with Jackson's definitely suspended, so he's out the first 2 games, and Havenstein's dealing with an ankle injury. So if he doesn't have those 2 guys against a very good Detroit front, he's still going to be fine. But Justin Fields' upside is so incredible just because of his rushing ability. So he would be in that top 15 mix. I'd probably still start Stafford, but he'd be 15. I start him over Dak, for example.
Wow.
I'd rather have. I don't think Dak's gonna have a good game at all. So
that's a really tough.
I think Justin Fields is in a much better spot just because, again, what he does with the legs.
Let's take a huge opportunity for him to win that number 1 spot if he can.
Yeah, that's very true. He could keep that job.
He's got that Russell Wilson voodoo doll just poking in the calf.
Right in the calf.
I think a lot of people have that voodoo doll.
Sean Payton for sure. Okay, running back rankings run through. Let's start with 1 through 12 in our consensus rankings, and this is PPR that we're looking at. I don't think there's anybody in the running back rankings 1 through 12 that you would bat an eyelash at. It starts with McCaffrey, Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson, the top 3 running backs rather that we were taking all season long. Is there a surprise on this list, Katie?
Well, not really, but I was surprised that McCaffrey went from a calf to an Achilles.
Yeah, that's true.
That's a little concerning
I'm
to
going
me.
to just guess that after the Amon-Ra St. Brown saga, and I forget who it was that they didn't report last year with the injury, every team that there's an injury out there coming into week 1, they're on the injury report. Nobody wants to get fined for this. So he should be
fair.
okay.
All right.
Alvin Kamara, great matchup against Carolina. Rashad White against Washington. That's another matchup that I would run toward. I think that's going to be very good. Running backs 13 through 24. These are going to be RB2s. You're going to start most of these running backs, but let's talk about a few of them. You see on this list, looking in the middle of it, there's Aaron Jones. A couple spots ahead of him is Raheem Mostert. I think we should talk about Raheem Mostert for a bit. In fact, there's 2 Dolphins on this list, Jamey. They're both going up against Jacksonville. Jaguars added Eric Armstead to their defensive line. They've got some good linebackers, but speed is the key in Miami. And the best way to take pressure off of Tua is to run the football a little bit or throw to your running backs. I think Raheem Mostert, use him while he's healthy, right?
That's the theory, and look, you can start Devon Achane as well. I know a lot of people wondering, okay, why would you draft Achane so high when Mostert's still the starter, still has the goal line opportunities, at least going into the season. They both have a chance here to make plays in the passing game, probably more so Achane than Mostert. And there's no third receiver right now from Miami I think that they trust fully. Odell Beckham, who they brought in to be in that role, is on the PUP list. Malik Washington's still a rookie. Maybe Berrios comes in and makes some plays.
I wonder if it's Jonnu Smith, but still not to the extent that you're talking about.
Jonnu Smith would be a part of that as well. But, Achane, that's what they kept saying. He could play in the slot. He could be an option in the passing game. We saw it at times last year. So I think both these guys have top 20 upside. And if they both score, it could be top 10 upside based on how they have typically operated at times last year.
We're definitely going to like a lot of players in that Dolphins and Jaguars game. Running backs that are in the wide running back 3 range. I almost said wide receiver 3 range. But they're in our consensus rankings after 24th at the position. And these are the names that fantasy managers are going to struggle with. It's going to be guys like, well, this is actually the list after that. This is 37 through 48. These are guys you're probably not going to start, but you are going to go ahead and keep them on your bench. J.K. Dobbins is a name that stands out to me as someone who's interesting. Here's the list, 25 through 36. It's almost like dealer's choice here. Almost anybody on this list you could talk about, and there's questions that could they be great, could they be bad? I want to point toward Ramondre Stevenson against Cincinnati. I think that this could be a bad game for the Patriots. This is an offense that's not expected to score a lot of points. I know he's their main running back. I don't know how many catches he'll end up getting, and I don't know if he's got a shot to get triple digits in yardage. You can see in our consensus rankings, he's outside of our top 24 all the way around. I would view him as more of a flex play than anything else. But a name that you've got on your list, Jamey, and you like Jerome.
You got some, Kate?
No, but I will also say, one, he's behind one of the worst O-lines in the league.
That's
and
true.
Two,
I should have mentioned that.
If you look at the total of this game, or excuse me, the line of this game, they're heavy underdogs in this, which doesn't exactly lend itself to a big running.
Could be.
script.
Would you be surprised if he had more than 14 touches in the game, Katie?
Yes.
Yeah, I would be a little bit surprised too. Jamey, Jerome Ford, going to be the lead back for Cleveland to start the year. Matchup against Dallas is tough. Where do you come out on Jerome Ford?
Top 24 running back. You look at what he did last year when he took over for an injured Nick Chubb. He was fantastic. Basically he was living in that 11 to 15 point range. He's going to get the majority of touches. I don't think they're going to lean on Deontay Foreman or Pierre Strong, so his role in the passing game should be solidified. And this passing game right now, a lot of questions because you have Deshaun Watson coming back from the shoulder injury. So when you talk about guys who are going to get a lot of work in terms of workload, Jerome Ford may be among the top 5 guys in terms of total touches for this week. So it's hard to overlook. And I don't think Dallas' run defense is going to be as stout as it was a year ago. I just think Jerome Ford, workload, potential to score, what he did last year, working the passing game, it's hard to overlook that.
Let's talk about the last time we saw this Dallas run defense that was really good. They got absolutely gashed by Aaron Jones last year in that wild card game. So I really like this as well.
Mike Zimmer, the new defensive coordinator there, they bulked up Mozzie Smith. They've added some defensive linemen to get some meat there to try and slow down the run. I am a little worried about Jerome
Brown's
Ford's
offensive line wasn't great last year either, and now they get guys back.
And well, Jedrick Wills is banged up. I'm not sure if he's going to play that much.
Conklin's
That's something to keep in mind. Conklin is back. That's a really good thing. I'm going to give you 3 running backs real quick. Just tell me the order and how you'd start them. DeAndre Swift, Javonte Williams, and Najee Harris, Jamey. Just give me the names.
Javante's the easy starter. Najee next, Swift last. I'm nervous about Swift against the Titans.
I kind of like Swift against the Titans. I think he can make an impact in the passing game, maybe find a touchdown. We know that Caleb Williams does like those improvisational plays. When we come back on Fantasy Football Today, wide receiver rankings run through, the tight ends as well. We will help you get your lineup set for Week 1 in the National Football League. Don't go anywhere. Fantasy Football Today is back on the air, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. A couple of news items. This is kind of big-time stuff. We did not see T. Higgins practice on Friday. You're going to need to check his availability heading into the games on Sunday. If you have a Packers wide receiver, an Eagles wide receiver, probably should plan on starting those guys ahead of T. Higgins if you don't have a better replacement than those receivers. It sounds like a lot, but a better receiver on your bench already. But keep that in mind that you might be without T. Higgins. And then in Pittsburgh, no practice for Russell Wilson. Looks like Justin Fields could have a path to starting. That's another one that you might want to pay attention to. You might want to pick up Justin Fields and put him on your bench just in case things break his way for that game. Let's go through our wide receiver rankings. We'll start with 1 through 12 in our consensus rankings, and these are the superstars that you know you're going to start. We've got one rookie on this list in Marvin Harrison. I don't think that that's a shock given that he was a consensus second-round pick. Mike Evans was more of a third-round pick, but now he is a top 7 wide receiver going up against that Commanders secondary. Really does not look good on paper. I've got questions about their pass rush. I think Mike Evans is going to pick up where he left off in week number 1. And 2 Rams on this list going up against the Lions. Both Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp are top 12. And Jamar Chase is on this list. This is assuming that he plays. He said that he's a game time decision. We know that he's been in and out of practice. We will see if he plays. That's another one to keep an eye on heading into week number 1.
I love that he said he's a game time decision, not the team.
Right. Wide receivers 13 through 24 in our consensus rankings. These are still guys that you're going to be starting. Chris Olave at the top. You see Jalen Waddle, the number 2 receiver in Miami. Makes sense as a top 15 guy. You see Devontae Smith, Drake London, maybe a little bit lower than you expected. We were drafting Drake London in round 2. Some people got him in round 3. Here he is as more of a middle to low end wide receiver too. And I want to point you in the direction of the last 2 names on this list. There's Brandon Ayuk against the Jets. There's DJ Moore against the Tennessee Titans. Kind of want to get the temperature of the room on how we feel about these guys. Ayuk, his first game back, really didn't practice that much. Is there concern about trusting him this week, Jamey?
Yeah, I mean, Katie talked about it earlier, that there's no guarantee he's going to play his normal amount of snaps. They don't necessarily, I think, have to lean on Ayuk to win the game. He's going to be a big part of it regardless, but they don't need him to be the focal point. When you have a McCaffrey, a Kittle, a Debo, they have enough weapons to beat the Jets. And so this is not the week. Plus, you got a really good secondary on the other side of the ball. He's going to see Sauce Gardner at times. They only allowed 5 touchdowns to wide receivers in the season last year, so they're really good at stopping opposing passing games. And I just think with Trent Williams maybe not out there at 100%, which is why I'm concerned about Brock Purdy as well. Like, this passing game across the board could be less than stellar based on what we're used to seeing. So even though they're home, even though they're favorites, even though they should be able, again, to beat the Jets without 100% of Brandon Ayuk, for me as a fantasy manager, he's only starting in 3 receiver leagues.
There are going to be weeks this season where Brandon Ayuk will be a top 12, top 15 type of fantasy wide receiver. I would use a little bit of caution there. So I agree with you. He's last on my wide receiver 2 list for week number 1. DJ Moore, another guy that I think we're going to disagree on. I like DJ Moore this week. I know that this Tennessee secondary, very, very good on paper. I don't know how good their pass rush is going to be, and I think DJ Moore leads Chicago in targets, catches, yards over the course of the season and in week number 1. I'm happy to start him as a number 2 wide receiver. Can you make the case against him, Jamey?
Yeah, L'Jarius Sneed. That's the only thing I need to say. I mean, he shut him down last year when they played the Chiefs, and you have a really good secondary that's been revamped for the Titans, plus a better coordinator in Denard Wilson, who helped the Ravens defense last year lead the NFL in interceptions. Titans were worse last year in that category with 6. You got a rookie quarterback making his first start. The history of rookie quarterbacks making their first start is awful. And so while there'll be great games ahead for DJ Moore, great games ahead for Caleb Williams, Katie, when you look at this, we spent a lot of time talking this offseason about there's Keenan Allen there, there's Rome Odunze there. We don't have to see the Bears quarterback, whether it was Justin Fields last year or Caleb Williams this year, leaning on DJ Moore like Fields did. Right. So I don't think the target share is going to be the same. I do think the interior of the Titans is going to be a huge problem for Caleb Williams. So DJ Moore's upside to me is extremely capped in a very, very tough matchup, which is why he's the 30th receiver for me.
I would say that the share is going to be a little bit lower, but the volume will be higher. I think the Bears are going to be much more of a passing team this year. It's kind of what I'm counting on with DJ Moore both this week and moving forward. Let's remember those names, Ayuk and Moore, as we look at the wide receivers in our consensus rankings between 25 and 36. And these are the guys that you're going to make start-sit decisions on. These are names on the list along the lines of Michael Pittman. Calvin Ridley is going to be on this list. Terry McLaurin, Chris Godwin. Can you measure some of those guys up? Are you starting everybody I just named ahead of DJ Moore, Jamey? Somebody like that?
Easily.
I'll give you the names again if you want them, but I think
Michael
you know
Pittman?
who I said.
Not Pittman, no. But, Katie, I'll ask you this because obviously you're studying the numbers. The over-under, you said, is for the Dolphins game. To me, Christian Kirk's in such a much better spot than DJ Moore because of what the expectations are for that game. And you look at the pass rush from Miami, non-existent. Kirk, I know he had the calf injury in camp, but I love looking at the Vegas number when you start to look at your start-sit decisions because that's going to tell you they expect a lot of points. You should expect a lot of points. You should expect a lot of production. So I would imagine you like that Miami-Jacksonville game quite a bit.
Yes, absolutely, especially when it comes to the receivers and the quarterbacks because, like you said, it's going to be a shootout.
So Kirk is one name, and Chris Godwin's another name that I see on my rankings, and I kind of want to move them up. I'm excited about them. Kirk, for the reasons that you said, Jamey, high-scoring game. I like his matchup in the slot against the Dolphins slot corner. Godwin's also going to line up in the slot, and I loved how he played at the end of last season when he was healthy. His production was great. He averaged over 15 PPR points per game. That's what I'm looking for. I think I've got him too low, and I'm the high guy already on Chris Godwin.
I'm going to lower where I have Pickens, and probably DK Metcalf. So both Godwin and Kirk ahead of those.
Can you give me a few seconds on George Pickens and why you would lower him?
Well, first off, if it's Justin Fields, I don't want to trust fully George Pickens because we know Fields is a little bit of a wild card. He was great with DJ Moore last year. He could be great with Pickens this year. But A.J. Terrell's on the other side of that defense. It's going to be a little bit tough for Pickens. So last year, great when Deontay Johnson was off the field. Great when it was everybody but Kenny Pickett at quarterback. But for this week, I think he's more of a number 3 receiver as opposed to a must-start guy. So Godwin's ceiling is a little bit higher.
Yeah, and McLaurin.
Especially against Commanders in that pass defense.
Yes, absolutely right. And then McLaurin for that Commanders offense. I like his opportunity to get a lot of volume. I would start him ahead of George Pickens as well. Let's shift now to tight ends and our consensus rankings there, 1 through 12. And yeah, you're going to see Kelsey on this list. This is embarrassing, but what are you going to do? The game already happened. Fantasy managers know it. Once you start a guy, there's nothing you can do about it.
He wasn't one for me.
No, he was one for me. I admit it in full PPR. Who is your number 1 tight end?
Laporta.
Oh, okay. Makes all the sense in the world. Mark Andrews. I'm talking about for week 1. Laporta's your number 1 tight end for week 1. Good for you. Mark Andrews was 5th for me, so I was behind consensus on there. I see Dallas Goedert at 11, and Jamey, you and I are going to disagree on this one. Tell everybody why you like Goedert. I'll be very quick on why I don't.
So I do think that Kellen Moore's offense is going to benefit Goedert in a big way. And Katie, you mentioned the Packers Cowboys game when you talk about Aaron Jones. The last 2 times we've seen the Packers try to defend tight ends, it was awful. It was Jake Ferguson going for 10, 93, and 3 touchdowns. And then your guy, George Kittle, against the Packers defense.
Oh, you're right.
6 for 81 and a touchdown in that playoff game as well. So they have struggled to defend tight ends recently. I know they added Xavier McKinney, but the Giants were bad at defending tight ends with McKinney was a part of that as well. So upgraded offense, more target, I think, potential for Goedert because they will throw the ball more. And I like the setup for him against this defense. So once you get past tight end 9, there's no guarantees. So I'll lean on offense, I'll lean on total, I'll lean on opportunity, and I think Goedert has all 3 of those.
I'm nervous about the opportunity part for Dallas Goedert. I feel like he's a touchdown or bust type of tight end. There are other tight ends I like better that might have a little bit of a better matchup. This is going to sound gross, and I don't want to make a bet on this, but I think Zach Ertz could have a better
He might. Look, again,
Dallas Goedert because they're in the exact same range.
You get to that group of guys where there's no certainty. You got to look for things that you like. You like Ertz's situation. I like Goedert's situation. I'll let you break the tie. Who do you think's going to have the better day?
Goedert.
Okay, totally get it. We'll see how that goes on Friday. You'll hear about that next week on the show for sure. A tweet before we go to break. Let's see what the people have to say. This is from Marcus Stroman. He's a Yankee. He's a Yankees fan. Mostert or Najee in PPR this week?
Not even close.
Mostert.
Mostert.
Yeah, and he's not going to catch a lot of passes, but I think he's got a better shot to score and definitely a better shot to get more yardage than Najee, even though both of these running backs will split reps. When we come back, we don't know what's going to happen. Only Katie knows what's going to happen. We're going to go over some player props. We're going to tie fantasy into it. Some players that you need to know about and their stats going into week number 1.
It's time for Fantasy Football Today's Prop Challenge presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. All right, fellas, here's the deal. I have some top props that I have. Oh, feels good. I like that. Not yet. Okay. I have some top props that I have locked in for this weekend. I'm going to give you the player and the stats, so whether it's their receiving yards, rushing yards, touchdowns, whatever.
Okay.
You have to guess what that stat line is, and then we'll talk about if I'm going over or under on it and what you guys think.
All right.
First one, Tony Pollard receiving yards.
Okay.
Where do you think his line's going to be? Or how many? receiving yards you think he'll have?
You want the prop or the number?
No, give the number that you think it's going to be.
Okay.
And then I'll tell you what the prop line is.
So putting a half would not make sense.
Are we ready?
Oh,
18
wow.
for receiving yards.
Receiving yards for Tony Pollard. He's going to be involved in the passing.
Okay, and you say 18. So it's 10.5. You both like the over, which I like the over on this one as well, especially if we look at this. It feels too low. I mean, he was averaging about 15 receiving yards per game in the last 10 games of the season. And you look at this Bears run defense, pretty stout, but not so good against run. 47 is why. I hope so.
I think this is the direction that the Titans want to go in.
But not with him.
I think they'll do it with him or with Tyjae Spears. I think they're going to intermatch these guys, and you're not going to know what they're going to do, regardless of who's on the field. And Pollard's got just as much potential of breaking a long run as Tyjae Spears does. I'm a little bit worried about how they'll do running the ball against Chicago, because I think that Bears front, I think it's getting better. But as far as defending running backs out of the backfield, I love this prop. It's only 10.5.
10.5.
I love it. That's a great call, and we both agree. I think he's going to go way over.
Like you said, Bears gave up almost 60 yards per game to backs in the receiving game. All right, now we're looking at James Conner and his rushing attempts.
Ooh, and it's against Buffalo.
And worth saying that this line is 6.5, nearly a touchdown. So they are big dogs in this matchup, which doesn't always lean towards. Okay, so we got 16 and 13. We're all on this together. I gave the over 12.5 is where they put the line on this one. Offensively, last year the Cards, right, were all over the place. But the one thing that was good was their rush ups. I think it's going to be a closer game than they think it's going to be. And also the weather in this one, it's windy with a little bit of rain.
Where do you have Conner ranked this week? Because I know you were very, very
as I'll say, whenever he's healthy, he's going to have an opportunity to be a top 20 running back when the matchup isn't awful. And without Milano there, this matchup isn't awful for him. So I think we're going to see enough attempts. I do think that the Cardinals are going to keep it close. He's not as involved in the passing game in Drew Petzik's offense. It's just not the thing for him, which was a big concern for ranking him as high as he was in some places, or drafting him as high as he was. And so I think his rush attempts will be there, especially while the game is close. That's something that I think the Cardinals will lean on.
I want to see that Cardinals offensive line. I want to see if they've made any improvements from last year and if they can be any better, if they can pop open holes for James Conner.
All right, but you still like it over the 12.5?
I do, yes.
All right, another running back, Jonathan Taylor and his rush yards.
Against Houston. All right.
88 and 77. Wow. Okay, so 74.5. I took the over. Seems like you guys are both with that one as well. I mean, especially when we look at what Lamar Jackson was able to do them in the divisional round. I think that's great. I feel like we got to move quicker here through this one. So any thoughts? I
mean, we know that Jonathan Taylor is going to be a must-start running back anyway. I'm worried about almost everybody else in that Colts offense. Richardson's going to be started. Taylor, yes. Everybody else, I don't know if there's a guy that I really trust in Indy's offense for Week 1 against this Texans defense.
All right, next one. We talked about this game a lot. Tua's longest completion.
Ooh.
Dun, 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 dun.
42, 35. Okay, so it's 38.5. I took the over. Why do you like the over?
I mean, look at the receivers. These are big play guys waiting to happen. So whether it's Tyreek or Jalen Waddle, I think both guys are going to be hugely involved. Ton of targets for both these guys. So I don't think the secondary, I know they talk about trying to limit the big plays. That's the stupidest thing I could ever hear from Mike McDaniel. Big play, big play, big play all day long.
And that's what they're built for. That's why they have players with speed like Tyreek Hill, like Jalen Waddle has. And he can even get this with Devon Achane as well. I know my number is under there.
But it's right about there.
It's right about there. I like the over too. He was connecting pretty frequently in the practices that I saw in Miami. Tua to Tyreek Hill deep down the field.
Worth noting, he went over this mark in Week 1 over the last 2 seasons in Miami. All right, next. Jordan Love's passing yards. Another game and a quarterback we like this week. How many passing yards will Jordan Love have? 255 and 232. So the line is 256.5.
Oh my
gosh. I went over it. Both of you guys are under on this one. One, we know I'm not high on the Eagles, and that pass defense was horrible last year. They did take care of it in the draft. I'm just not sure that those guys get up to speed this quickly. So why are you under
new running
this
back,
mark?
New option back there. So I think Josh Jacobs is going to be a little bit more of an efficient runner than Aaron Jones, and I think they're going to have a little bit more explosive plays as well from the run game. So Jordan Love's going to be fine. I think this is a 230, 240 2 touchdown, maybe 3 touchdown game. But I think Josh Jacobs, in terms of what the yardage will be, will take away a little bit of the passing game.
Katie, what was one of your concerns about Philadelphia when we talked about this game earlier on? New field, new place, new surroundings. I wonder if that, listen, it's going to impact both teams. Yeah. It's going to affect them both. So a blow-up game from Jordan Love as far as yardage. I think it'll take a couple of big plays from Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, those guys, for it to happen. This is still a pretty good number for Jordan Love, by the way.
Yeah, you guys are in line. I mean, and I will say he went under this in 10 of 17 games last year. It was really the second half of the season that I was looking at him really heating up there. All right, let's go to one tweet here for Ask FFT. All right, Jaylen Warren or Zach Moss this week. Dave?
I think it comes down to what the format is. If it's full PPR, I might take the chance on Warren. I don't think either guy has huge upside either way. In non-PPR, for me, it's Moss easily.
Give me Moss in both. I'm just a little concerned about Warren with the hamstring injury, and if Fields is starting, that takes away a lot of the options for the running backs.
All right, that is our first BetMGM prop challenge. We get back more FFTs. If you have questions, we should have already tweeted them. Okay, Eagles 24, Packers. Oh, come on now.
Philly's going to win.
Packers might. Who do you think is going to win that game?
Philly.
All right, it's just me all by myself wearing the green that's against, and the control room's against me as well. Ask FFT is coming back here on CBS Sports Network. Keep it locked. All right, welcome back to FFT. Before we get out of here, we got to read some tweets. Here's one from Dakota. I have both Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely rostered on my fantasy team. Where does their performance leave me standing for week 2 and beyond? Who do I start, Jamey?
Oh, I drop them both. You don't want to deal with the headache. You're starting Andrews. Just see what happens with Likely, but hopefully you get quality production from both of them.
If you've got a flex, you could start both.
Start both, drop both.
They play Las Vegas in week 2. It wouldn't surprise me if they both had big games.
Okay, let's get one more question in here. All right, DJ Moore or Chris Godwin, Tua or Baker, half PPR for Tooch. FF, I think means fantasy football.
I'm going to take DJ Moore over Godwin, especially in half PPR. And I do have Tua over Baker. I like both those quarterbacks this week, but Tua has more upside in my opinion.
Godwin by a lot and Tua over Baker.
All right. Okay, PPR with a half TEP.
Tight end premium.
Tight end
so
premium.
The catches for tight ends are worth a half point more than the catches for everybody else.
Got it. Final flex spot, Pollard, DJ Moore, or Ferguson?
Ferguson for me, given the scoring.
Yeah, because you're just going to get more points that way, and he's got just as good of a shot to score as Pollard. Maybe as good of a shot to score as DJ Moore.
Okay. Okay, and then in a half PPR, Wandale, Dortch, 80, Mitch, pick one, please, and thanks. Quite polite.
It's week 1. Why is this your situation?
Well, I think you could be talking about some questionable lineups and deeper leagues. For me, I would actually go with Dortch.
I think I would too. I think he's actually going to be sneaky involved in what the Cardinals are going to do, and I think the Cardinals will ultimately be trailing in their matchup against Buffalo.
Okay, one more that we got from the control room. Should I start Pickens or Watson?
Are we so low on Pickens that we're going to take Watson?
But here's the problem, though. The problem is that if it's Fields starting, which we're not going to know until probably Sunday, then that lowers the. I would probably start Watson over Pickens.
I would too. I think that's, and he probably has more upside than Pickens anyway. I know that sounds.
He doesn't have more upside than Pickens. They both have immense upside, but for the quarterback concern,
I don't know.
I would. You drafted Watson ahead of Pickens for his upside?
No. But if I've got them both at this point for how their offenses are and the question mark at quarterback, even if it's Russ, it's not like Russ is going to be at 100%. I'm taking Watson. I'm sold on it.
All right, real quick before we get out of here, what's the number one thing you're looking forward to this Sunday?
Oh, a lot of these questionable backfields. Who's going to be the leader in Cincinnati, in Miami, even Pittsburgh, Tennessee? I want to see these backfields get a little bit more answers.
Malik Neighbors was drafting him all over the place. I want to see him pop off against Minnesota.
I want to see how the 49ers do. I know that's on Monday, and maybe it's like a little bias
really surprising
of me. I know. Sometimes I like to surprise you guys, throw out something you're not looking forward to, but this has been Fantasy Football Today. Thanks for hanging with us. If you want to listen more, go ahead and scan the QR code on the screen there, and you can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts.